Good morning, all of you. Welcome to Ansar Kari. So let's start with today's analysis for 27th of April 2023. So firstly, we saw yesterday that 10 Jawans, they were killed in a blast by the Maoist in Dantewada district. So this topic is related to internal security, so it becomes important. Things related to left-wing extremism, all of that falls under this topic. So here we see कि civilian driver is also dead and district reserve guard team was returning from an anti-Naxal operation which was launched on a tip-off when their vehicle was blown up by an IED packed with 50 kg of explosives. So you can see the impact that such a huge impact it had created, and this is the site of blast. And you can see that after this blast, a crater has been created on a road. So it blew off the vehicle of the security forces, and this is around 350 kilometers away from the state's capital, Raipur. Moving on. So despite the court stay, OTT platforms, they face pressure on content. So talking about the net alert here, two advisories, they were issued by the INB ministry. So first was in February 2022, it told the streaming platforms, that is the OTT platforms, to ensure key details of grievance officer, they are made publicly available on their websites. This was one thing. And on 24th of March 2023, it told the platforms to exercise abundant precaution in ensuring that films and web series, they do not fall foul of the code of ethics that is laid out in the IT rules. So सबसे पहले जो ग्रीवेंस ऑफिसर से रिलेटेड डिटेल्स होंगी वो उनको अपनी वेबसाइट पे पब्लिकली अवेलेबल करना इंपॉर्टेंट होगा. नेक्स्ट थिंग वाज कि जो भी कंटेंट आ रहा है, मूवीज आ रही हैं, वेब सीरीज आ रही है ऑन द ओटीटी प्लेटफॉर्म्स, they should not violate code of ethics which is laid out on, like, which are a part of the IT rules. So you can't violate them. So despite the court stay, the OTT platforms are still facing the pressure on the content and facing the pressure to comply with the IT rules 2021 to exercise further restraint in streaming the mature content. So this is despite the fact that two high courts, they have stayed the provision of these IT rules, which require them to appoint a grievance officer and take down the content when ordered to do so by a self-regulatory body. So ऐसा कुछ अभी separate regulatory body nahi hai when it comes to regulating the OTT platforms and their activities and whatever content is posted on them. So they are working in a self-regulatory mode. And two advisories जो issue की गई थी by the Information and Broadcasting Ministry, हमने इसकी बात कर ली है, but High Court ने इन IT rules के ऊपर stay लगा दिया था कि OTT platforms, they do not have to basically abide by them or you need to implement them. But उसके बाद भी the pressure on the OTT platforms, that still continues. So Kochi water metro services, it has been launched and this is for the first time in India. So अगर आप देखो कि मतलब that's how it has been designed कि it looks like a metro. So it's a pioneering initiative in sustainable urban water transport and tourism. So these are going to be electric. So that's like also helping us at the environmental front, at the climate change front, but they are like air conditioned. So that's again the opposite of that. And it would be reducing 44,000 tons of CO2 emissions per annum. So Dalai Lama receives the 1959 Raman Magsaysay Award in person from the members of the Raman Magsaysay Award Foundation at his residence in Dharamshala, and 65 years after it was conferred on him. So basically, he's receiving this award in person, and which was conferred to him 64 years ago. So his brother, he had received this award in 1959, and now this award has been given to him finally after 65 or 64 years when it was like given to him. And Raman Magsaysay Award, it is called the Nobel Prize of Asia. So that's there, and you can also find out about who are the latest recipients in India to receive this award. So Supreme Court modifies the order on ESZ around the protected forest. So economically or ecologically sensitive area, it reasoned that ESZ cannot be uniform across the country and it has to be protected area specific. So that's going to be specific to each area, and it's not going to be a universal thing across India. So last year, court had ordered that 1 kilometer of buffer zone for the protected areas, it is going to act as a shock absorber. So जो 1 kilometer का buffer area होने वाला है around the protected area, that was the shock absorber की तरह it would be acting, and that is what is the ESZ. So court said that the purpose of declaring these ecologically sensitive areas is not to hamper the day-to-day activities of the citizens. So आपको पता होना चाहिए कि what are going to be the prohibitions, कौन सी activities would be prohibited in these areas, या कोई prohibition होगा भी या नहीं. So eco-sensitive zones of a minimum 1 kilometer, this is the minimum criteria, कि 1 kilometer would be the minimum size around the protected forest, national parks, and wildlife sanctuaries across the country. So they are kind of a buffer zone on the outside boundary of the protected areas. But we see that after this, the center and several states, including Kerala, they had returned to the court seeking modification of the judgment, saying that judicial direction affected the hundreds of villages on the peripheries of the forest. So, the court said that basically ESZ हम इसलिए नहीं लेके आ रहे हैं कि it would be hampering the day-to-day activities of the citizens. So if the direction as issued, it is continued, it would certainly hamper the day-to-day activities of the citizens residing in the ESZ area. So as such, we find that the direction needs to be modified. So court said that a stringent observance of the June 2022 judgment would cause more harm than good. For one, man-animal conflict would only increase rather than abate. And however, court made it clear that mining within the national park and wildlife sanctuary and within an area of 1 kilometer from the boundary of such national park and the wildlife sanctuary shall not be permissible. So mining activities are not permissible in these areas and even in the protected areas. So fruits of labor, farmers displaying over 50 varieties of kharif seeds during the International Seed Day celebrations, which were organized by the Deccan Development Society, which is in, it was this was organized in the state of Telangana. So High Court orders triple tests for the couple facing legal hurdles to have child through surrogacy. So Karnataka High Court, it has evolved triple tests for considering the plea of a couple to have a child through altruistic surrogacy. It has suggested these to iron out the creases in the Surrogacy Regulation Act 2021, which prohibits men above 55 years to have a child through surrogacy. So the features and the provisions of this act, they become important. So one is this, a men above 55 years of age cannot have a child through surrogacy. And court also said that the provision in the act which states that surrogate mothers, they should be genetically related to the couple who wants to have a child through surrogacy defeats both altruism and logic. So altruistic surrogacy should mean surrogacy by an outsider. And therefore, the provision runs counter to the philosophy or the principle behind the enactment. So it made these observations while partly allowing a petition filed by 57-year-old employee in a government college and his 45-year-old wife. So that is the plea, and you can find out about more provisions of this act. Coming to the editorial page, so here so Rajasthan, it is now coming up with a bill on gig workers. Welfare board would be like they heralds good tidings. So initiative on a gig workers welfare board pe things are going on in the state of Rajasthan, and isse pehle it was in news because of the right to health bill. So with an estimated 8 million people which are employed in an industry built on the back of smartphone revolution, gig workers has become a major source of jobs for youth in India. So as a supplementary income, you're like you can be a freelancer and you can work some and get some additional amount of income. So it goes without saying that in a country where informal labor and unemployment have defined the nature of the jobs market in the last decade, gig economy has been a beneficial outlet of employment. So this is especially true of youth and the migrant workers as they seek a ready and quick means of securing finances and flexible hours. So दो benefits that एक तो you are like easily able to get your income because that's on per task basis, and then you get the benefit of flexible working hours. So it is, we can say कि smartphone revolution की वजह से we are seeing the number of people increasing in the gig economy in this area. So we are again seeing कि यहाँ पे भी competition बहुत increase हो चुका है among the platforms, and the availability of the cheap labor force. It has led to lowering of the incentives for the gig workers, even as their workload and uncertainty of the work hours that has increased significantly relative to the pay that they are getting, which has also become insufficient for many. So adding this to the fact that gig workers, they are not recognized as workers because abhi this is unorganized sector, but partners by most aggregating platforms, and that they lack any social security benefits also. So इससे regarding हम already बात कर चुके हैं कि they are not entitled to basically social security or they are not guaranteed these benefits. यहाँ पे हमने like code on social security की बात करी थी कल ही कि it is basically not guaranteeing them social security benefits. It is just talking about कि who all is eligible to get a social security benefit, and उसमें जो gig economy में workers हैं, employees हैं, they are eligible, but it will not guarantee them the benefit. So that was the debate that we had. So seen in this slide, we see the decision by the Rajasthan government to deliver a Rajasthan platform-based gig workers registration and welfare bill. It should be welcomed even if it will be introduced before the assembly elections later this year. So the draft bill, it envisages a welfare board that will design the welfare policies and also hear the grievances of the gig workers on a piece rate basis. So जो राजस्थान स्टेट गवर्नमेंट का जो बिल है रिगार्डिंग द गिग वर्कर्स, उसके जो प्रोविजंस की बात करें ऑफ दिस ड्राफ्ट बिल, तो इट इज सेइंग कि एक वेलफेयर बोर्ड बनाया जाएगा दैट विल बी डिजाइनिंग वेलफेयर पॉलिसीज दैट विल बी ऑब्वियसली फॉर द बेनिफिट ऑफ द गिग इकोनॉमी फॉर द वर्कर्स there, and also it would be hearing the grievances related to them. So the board, it is also expected to work towards a social welfare corpus, which will be financed by a cess on the digital transactions made by the consumers on the platforms that utilize the gig worker labor. एक सोशल वेलफेयर कॉर्पस बनाने की भी बात की जा रही है, तो उसकी फाइनेंसिंग कैसे आएगी? एक सेस लेवी किया जाएगा ऑन ऑल द डिजिटल ट्रांजैक्शंस जो कंज्यूमर्स कैरी आउट करते हैं, विच दे ट्रांजैक्ट ऑन द प्लेटफॉर्म्स जहाँ पे गिग वर्कर्स अपनी सर्विसेज प्रोवाइड करते हैं। तो उन ट्रांजैक्शंस पे सेस प्रोवाइड किया जाएगा एंड देन दैट सेस वुड बी ट्रांसफर टू दिस सोशल वेलफेयर कॉर्पस, जो ऑब्वियसली that can be used for providing social security benefits and other benefits to the employers and so to the employees of the gig economy. And then यहाँ पे example दिए गए हैं Thailand and Malaysia, for instance, like benefit from the health and accident insurance as well as social security that is financed by a deduction of 2% for every ride. सो इस तरीके से वहां पे भी 2% चार्ज किया जाता है। रिसेंटली यूनियन गवर्नमेंट पास द कोड ऑन सोशल सिक्योरिटी, वन ऑफ द 4 लेबर कोड्स जो पास किए गए थे, तो कोड ऑन सोशल सिक्योरिटी which also allowed for some social security for the gig workers, but the scheme only remains on paper without proper implementation. So it is not guaranteeing and then implementation is also poor. So if Rajasthan's pioneering draft bill it takes off, other states they could be compelled to utilize similar measures to ensure the welfare of the gig workers. So virtual digital assets, यहाँ पे हम बात कर रहे हैं क्रिप्टो करेंसीज की, इंडिया का क्या स्टैंड है एंड आगे how are we going to move forward as far as cryptocurrencies is concerned. So rule making, it's an arduous task, definitely. Oftentimes, the words in a gazette, they take a form of their own in the real world, diverging from the intent. So intent से different कभी-कभी जो real वर्ल्ड में जो उनका अल्टीमेटली मीनिंग निकल के आता है दैट इज डिफरेंट फ्रॉम व्हाट वाज द इंटेंट इनिशियली. सो दिस कैन बी particularly challenging in case of emerging technologies where change is rapid and constant. So वहाँ पे even rule making becomes a task. And consider the infamous Red Flag Act जो United Kingdom introduced at the advent of motor cars. It mandated that every motor car had to have 3 drivers, one at the wheel, the second a fellow passenger, and third on foot, holding a red flag to alert oncoming horse-drawn carriages. So ostensibly established in the interest of the safety, the act it only ended up strengthening the motor car industry elsewhere in Europe. So intent alag tha, ultimate जो impact हुआ in the real world that was different. But later on it would repealed in 1896. So आज हम बात कर रहे हैं artificial intelligence की, blockchain technologies की. So considered approach is that it is therefore heartening to see India taking a measured approach to regulating the virtual digital assets. And a prominent and far-reaching update has been India's recent notification extended the anti-money laundering provisions to virtual digital assets businesses and the service providers. So जो recent changes किए गए हैं उसमें Prevention of Money Laundering Act, it would now be applicable to all the transactions जो cryptos में carry out किए जाएंगे. And apart from this, Union Finance Ministry, in its Gazette notification, it extended these activities under the, again, this PMLA Act of 2002, जिसमें exchange between the virtual digital assets and fiat currencies की बात की गई, exchange between one or more firms. So basically, cryptos, they have been covered under the provisions of this act. So this means that virtual digital assets platforms carrying out the said activities, they will now have to register as a reporting entity with the Financial Intelligence Unit of India. So because of the provisions of the PMLA Act would be applicable on cryptos, so जो भी platforms होंगे, they would now have to get registered with the Financial Intelligence Unit of India. So unit is the national agency to strengthen India's efforts against money laundering and terror financing. So this Financial Intelligence Unit main task यही है to prevent money laundering and terror financing activities. And reporting entity platforms like CoinSwitch, Kuber ho gaya, they are now mandated to implement Know Your Customer record and then monitor all the transactions and report to the Financial Intelligence Unit of India as and when any suspicious activity is detected. So responsibility भी add up हो जाती है to the specifically to platforms या फिर brokers. So they obviously they would now have to implement this know your customer wala step, and then they would have to also record and monitor all the transactions which are carried out, and then also report any suspicious activity or transactions which they find is suspicious. So that would have to be reported. So this is a step in the right direction. So such rules, they are already applicable to banks, financial institutions, and certain intermediaries in the securities and real estate markets. So in different entities पे already ये provisions applicable हैं, and now we are extending them to the virtual digital assets also. So a standardization of such norms will go a long way in making the Indian virtual digital asset sector transparent. So transparency is very important, accountability important है, एक proper standardized procedure होना when it comes to that regulation, that would be making things much more transparent and easier in the coming times. So iski wajah se it would also help in building up the confidence and assurance in the ecosystem as well. And given that the government more oversight on the virtual assets transactions, so it would be a kind of win-win situation for all. Obviously sabko fayda hoga when we are saying that there needs to be a standardized procedure या standardized norms होने चाहिए, जिससे we'll have more transparency. जो consumer confidence है, that would be increasing, investor confidence would go up, and assurance of the ecosystem would also increase. Plus government की जो oversight होगी, that would be strong, that would be like, again, it would be like easily possible. So tax rates की बात करें तो recently जो इंडिया में जो applicable है या जो अभी recent changes किए गए हैं, 30% income tax impose होगा on the income that you are making through the investments or trading in cryptos. उसके अलावा 1% TDS would also be applicable on it. So यहाँ पे we are firstly talking about, these are risk mitigation measures which are in line with the global guidelines that were put forward by the International Monetary Fund and the Financial Action Task Force. So risk mitigation measures हैं जब हम बात करते हैं taxing the income from cryptos. So these are a part of the guidelines of IMF and FATF. So FATF is also extremely important. This has been used for a number of reasons. So FATF, in fact, it has a comprehensive definition also of virtual asset service providers. So that's in like long list, which is covering intermediaries, brokers, exchanges, custodians, hedge funds, and even mining pools. So FATF also talks about the definition of virtual asset service providers. से बात करता है उनके regulating की, monitoring की. So all of these are mentioned, and apart from this, so जो virtual asset service providers हैं and how they are like, how FATF and IMF deal with them, उनकी क्या guidelines हैं. So that could also become a basis for India to reconsider its tax treatment of the virtual digital assets, which is an outlier both domestically and internationally. But after all, with the PMLA notification and now mitigating the most critical money laundering and terror financing risk, there is little reason for the tax rates to be as prohibitively high as they are. So एक argument ये है जो यहाँ पे author of this article is saying since now crypto and all the transactions, they would be covered under the provisions of this PMLA Act. तो आप ज़्यादा high amount of income tax impose ना करो, तो that would be better. Because obviously high amount of income tax भी एक तरीका है of prohibiting the dependence upon the cryptos. So आप दोनों चीजें एक साथ करोगे तो that would become too much. And that's what the author of this article is suggesting. So perhaps there's an opportunity to bring virtual digital assets taxes on a par with other asset classes. So that this could be one thing. And reducing the tax arbitrage vis-a-vis other economies will also help stem the flight of the capital, consumers, investments, and the talent, as well as dent the gray economy for virtual digital assets. So tax arbitrage को अगर हम कम रखेंगे, so tax arbitrage basically meaning ये होता है कि suppose कोई और country है जहाँ पे cryptos पे कम amount का tax impose किया जाता है. India में it is relatively higher. तो बिकॉज ऑफ दिस ऑब्वियसली इन्वेस्टर्स हैं या जो ऑलरेडी लोगों ने इन्वेस्ट किया हुआ है, दे वुड शिफ्ट टू दोज कंट्रीज, क्योंकि वहां पे दे वुड हैव टू पे लेस अमाउंट ऑफ इनकम टैक्स ऑन द क्रिप्टो ट्रांजैक्शंस. सो अगर आर्बिट्रेज को भी हम कम रखेंगे तो दिस फ्लाइट ऑफ कैपिटल, कंज्यूमर्स, इन्वेस्टर्स, इसको भी हम स्टॉप करने में काफी हद तक सक्सेसफुल रहेंगे. सो देन अल्टीमेटली हर चीज में आजकल हम बात कर रहे हैं कि जो इंडिया की प्रेसिडेंसी ऑफ G20 प्लेटफॉर्म, उसको आप इस चीज के लिए यूटिलाइज कर सकते हो. तो दैट्स देयर. एंड अभी रिसेंटली हमने ये भी बात करी थी, वी आर लाइक डिस्कस दिस इन डिटेल, जो यूरोप, बेसिकली यूरोपियन यूनियन, इट इज कमिंग अप विद द लॉ रिगार्डिंग द रेगुलेशन ऑफ क्रिप्टोज. दैट इज माइका की हमने बात करी थी, मार्केट्स in crypto assets regulation. It has been passed by the European Parliament. And so going forward, a progressive regulatory framework will instill the animal spirit in India's innovation economy and establish India's virtual digital assets leadership, a lot like how Rolls-Royce rekindled the British manufacturing industry in the early 20th century. So that's how we can conclude here. So the third gen web is about public good. So there is a pervasive notion that third generation web, that is web 3.0, it is biased towards gaming and crypto industry. However, 2021 report by the US India Strategic Partnership Forum states that third gen web will be crucial for India to realize its $1.1 trillion digital asset opportunity by 2032. So from a policy perspective, the next gen web, that is complex. Part of the problem lies with the diverse descriptors employed by the experts. So हमारे लिए Web 3.0 की applications important है, कहाँ पे it can be used and how it is different from the other forms. And इस पे already PT में question आ चुका है. So Web 3 is not Web 3.0. Some experts term this third generation web as Web 3, while others use the descriptor Web 3.0. So that's how you use it. And it is basically talking more about decentralization. It is privacy oriented. It is based on blockchain and it is crypto asset friendly. So that's why it is being said it is biased more towards promotion of crypto industry and the gaming industry. And then it is also being claimed that this version is endowed with robust capability on data analytics front. So data analytics, maybe it would be helping, and it's different from the conventional models. So this way it's argued that Web 3.0 will create far better search engines as well, because it would be having much more enhanced capabilities when it comes to data analytics. So India's major digital public infrastructure push and deployment of Internet of Things in the rural development projects offer possibilities for deploying Web 3 in even rural areas also. Then its boldest element is the strategic role it assigns to the non-custodial wallets that function as digital passports for users to access blockchain-enabled transaction platforms. So in a way, these wallets, they help in creating ownership economy, whereby creators themselves control their content. So you can control your content yourself. Fundamentally, they work on the digital proof of identity. So यहाँ पे बात कर रखी कि how India can benefit because of Web 3.0. So पॉसिबल एप्लीकेशंस की यहाँ बात की गई है. तो सबसे पहले इट इज सेइंग कि इंडिया की जो हैंडीक्राफ्ट इंडस्ट्री है दैट कैन बेनिफिट, बिकॉज जो डिजिटल टोकन्स मिंट किए जाते हैं बाय वेब 3 प्लेटफॉर्म्स, दे वुड एनेबल द हैंडीक्राफ्ट एंटरप्राइजेस टू सिक्योर देयर इनोवेशंस. क्योंकि अभी जब हम बात करते हैं अबाउट द डिजाइंस that are created by the handicraft industry, they are not protected by the intellectual property rights. So that's where Web 3.0 can help in creating digital tokens, jiske through the handicraft industry and the people's and artisans, they can protect their innovations. Apart from this, India's major digital public asset, infrastructure push that we are like emphasizing more upon, because we are also moving towards digitization of the economy. So when we are talking about infrastructure, digital infrastructure push and the large scale deployment of internet of things, rural areas may, rural developmental projects may, they offer the possibilities of even deploying web3 in rural areas. So rural areas may, it has applications. So one of the understated facts of India's transformation story in recent times has been the rapid rise of community data. So this is basically, इतना ज्यादा इसको अप्रिशिएट नहीं किया जाता है, इतनी ज्यादा इसकी बात नहीं की जाती है जब हम बात करते हैं rise of community data in India. So we have the Atal Bhujal Yojana. It's an important source of data on groundwater utilization practices and the aquifer contamination, although this resource remains largely untapped for want of data analytics and capability. So basically data analytics में कुछ ऐसे projects जो rural area, जो rural India and rural area से specific है, वहाँ पे Web 3.0 can play an important role as far as data analytics is concerned. And one constraint today is inability of the data analytics capabilities to catch up with the pace of data generation in the rural areas. So just pace pay and just rate pay, the data is being generated in India. That is also very fast and we are not able to basically match up to that. So that's where again, Web 3.0 can help us. So indeed, India's national blockchain strategy of 2021 proposes to explore tokenization and apply the blockchain solutions for development programs. It will be a natural progression for India to craft a third-gen web strategy that optimizes public interest. So by utilizing all the capabilities of Web 3.0, we can also help in maximizing the public interest. And such a strategy, it should seek to combine the welcome features of Web 3 and Web 3.0. So distribution and utilization of water bodies in India, the majority of the water bodies, they serve as resources for fish farming. So here we have the data and that's what we'll be analyzing it. So chart 1 is showing the types of water bodies across India. So maximum are ponds, which constitute around 59.5% of the water bodies in India. Followed by it, we have tanks, then we have reservoirs and water conservation projects, and lakes are the least in number. Then the regional distribution is given through this map. So highest pond is we find in basically West Bengal. So you can see the blue colors maximum, you can see that almost entire West Bengal is covered with ponds. So it hosts around 4.57 lakh ponds in West Bengal. Then talking about tanks, so the maximum it's in Andhra Pradesh. Then we have the lakes. And likewise, you can spot the other water bodies also. So maximum potential is for fish farming. So you can see that red colors, it is almost the highest one. It is covering the maximum area. So that's for fish farming. Followed by we have for domestic or drinking purposes. Then we have for irrigation, for religious purposes and all of that. And groundwater recharge is also a large part in states like Punjab, UP, Uttarakhand. So what are the ambiguities in the nuclear liability laws? So what are the provisions of the Indian nuclear liability law? First, we'll understand that. क्या provisions हैं इस law के? What does it say about supplier liability in the event of any nuclear accident हो जाता है तो supplier पे क्या liabilities impose की जाएंगी या उसकी क्या liabilities रहेंगी? And why do some provisions in the law they continue to make the foreign companies wary of signing the deals with India? So क्या ऐसे provisions हैं which foreign countries they do not basically find good to invest in India because of those provisions? And what has the government said on the issue or regarding all this? So in this picture, you can see that's like a site at the Jaipur nuclear power project, and you can see that it's a Government of India enterprise. So Jaipur nuclear power project that we are coming out with the help of France. So issues regarding India's nuclear liability law continue to hold up more than a decade-old plan to build 6 nuclear power reactors in Maharashtra's Jaipur. This is the world's biggest nuclear power generation site under consideration at present. So world की biggest nuclear power generation site है, but still like it's been more than 10 years and things are like not moving forward. So what are the reasons? And apart from this, first we'll understand कि इस law के क्या provisions हैं. So laws on civil nuclear liability ensure कि compensation is available to the victims for any nuclear damage अगर होता है because of any nuclear disaster in future. So compensation की बात करता है ये law. International nuclear liability regime consists of multiple treaties and it was strengthened after the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear accident. So इसके बाद provisions और ज़्यादा strengthen किए गए. Umbrella Convention है on supplementary compensation. इसको adopt किया गया 1997 में with the aim of establishing minimum national compensation amount. So amount can further be increased through public funds to be made available by the contracting parties. And should the national amount be insufficient to compensate the damage caused by nuclear incident, so compensation को बाद में increase किया जा सकता है. So even though India was a signatory to this convention, Parliament ratified the convention only in 2016. So you need to remember that when we talk about the Convention on Supplementary Compensation, India is a signatory to it, but we ratified it in 2016. So these are two different things when we talk about signing a convention or a treaty on and then ratifying it. So to keep in line with the international convention, India enacted the Civil Liability for the Nuclear Damage Act in 2010 to put in place a speedy compensation mechanism for the victims of nuclear accident. So we came up with this law in 2010, and this act provides for strict and no fault liability on the operator of the nuclear plant, where it will be held liable for damage regardless of any fault on its part. So it also specifies the amount the operator will have to shell out in case of there is a damage by the accident at around rupees 1,500 crores and requires the operator to cover the liability through insurance also. And other damage claims they are more than rupees 1,500 crores, then this act it expects the government to step in, and it has limited liability, and it has limited the government liability amount to rupee equivalent of 300 million special drawing rights. So that's like somewhere about rupees 2,100 to rupees 2,300 crores. So even government जो amount of compensation या जो government की liability रहेगी, that has also been limited. So right now, India we have around 22 nuclear reactors with over a dozen more projects which are planned. And the existing reactors, they are operated by the state-owned Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited. So 22 nuclear plants, they are functional and they are controlled by this public body. So अब हम supplier की liability की बात करें as per this law in India. So international legal framework on the civil nuclear liability, including the annexure of this convention, it is based on the central principle of exclusive liability of the operator of a nuclear installation and no other person. So जो ये convention की भी हमने बात करी तो इसका central principle यही है कि जो operator रहेगा of the nuclear plant, it talks about its exclusive liability and not of any other person. So initial stages of nuclear industry development में foreign governments and industry, they agreed that excessive liability claims against the suppliers of the nuclear equipment would make their business unviable and hinder the growth of nuclear energy, and became an accepted practice for the national laws of countries to channel the nuclear liability to the operators of the plant with only some exceptions. So ये starting में किया गया, but two other points of rationale were also stated while accepting the exclusive operator liability principle, where one was to avoid the legal complications in establishing separate liability in each case, and the second was to make just one entity in the chain, that is the operator, to take out insurance instead of having the suppliers, construction contractors, and so on to take out their own insurances. So जो annexure hai of this convention, it says, and it basically it lays down only two conditions under which national law of a country may provide the operator with the right to recourse. So सिर्फ दो condition है which this convention talks about, जिसमें जो operator रहेगा of the nuclear power plant, it would be having the right of recourse, where they can extract the liability from the supplier. So one, if it is expressly agreed upon in the contract, or two, key nuclear incident results from an act or omission done with the intent to cause damage. However, India is going beyond these two conditions. For the first time, we introduced the concept of supplier liability over and above that of the operators in its civil nuclear liability law. So जो supplier की liability है, we strict to that as far as the Indian law is concerned. So architects of the law, they recognized the defective parts, they were partly responsible for the historical incidents, like अगर हम भोपाल गैस tragedy incident 1984 की बात करें, and we added this clause on the supplier liability. तो जो equipments provide किए गए, हमने ये देखा कि majorly उनमें defect मिला, and उसके वजह से we had to face such instances. So Indian law, that's why we are emphasizing more upon supplier liability rather than the operator's liability. So apart from the contractual right of the recourse, or when the intent to cause damage जब वो establish किया जाता है, so this law, it has section 17 जो बोलता है कि operator of the nuclear plant, after their share of compensation for damage in accordance with the act वो pay हो जाती है, they shall have the right of recourse where the nuclear incident, it has resulted as a consequence of an act of supplier or his employee, which includes the supply of equipment or material with a patent or latent defects or substandard services. So this is what the Indian law clearly talks about. So the supplier liability clause, why this has become an issue in the nuclear deals, is the thing that we'll be understanding the next. So foreign suppliers of the nuclear equipment from countries as well as the domestic suppliers, they have been wary of operationalizing the nuclear deals with India, as it has the only law where suppliers can be asked to pay the damages also. So Indian law एक ऐसा law है जो बोलता है कि suppliers basically they would be asked to pay for the damages. So that is the main concern when we talk about the nuclear deals. So concerns about the potentially getting exposed to unlimited liability under this act, and then the ambiguity over how much insurance to set aside in case of any damage claims, they have been sticking points for the suppliers in these nuclear deals. So there's then ambiguity ki kitna insurance you'll need to set aside, and obviously that would basically expose you to unlimited liability, because here we're talking about suppliers, they are also because Indian law, it is talking about suppliers liability also, and the reason we have seen ki why Indian law, it has kept this as one of the major part of the law. तो इंडिया में अगर हम एक्सिस्टिंग प्रोजेक्ट्स की बात करें, तो जैतपुर न्यूक्लियर प्रोजेक्ट, इट हैज बीन स्टक फॉर मोर देन अ डेकेड, महाराष्ट्र में है, एंड ओरिजिनल एमओयू साइन किया गया 2009 में. 2016 में ADF and NPCL, they signed a revised MOU, and 2018 में heads of both signed an agreement on the industrial way forward in the presence of the Indian Prime Minister and the French President Emmanuel Macron. So 2020 में EDF submitted its techno-commercial offer for the construction of 6 nuclear power reactors. But an EDF official told that the issue arising from the India's nuclear liability law remains an item on the agenda for both the countries. So still we're trying to progress forward. And बाकी nuclear power projects की बात करें तो there is one proposed in Kovada, which is in Andhra Pradesh. It is also being installed. So despite signing the civil nuclear deals with a number of countries like USA, France, Japan, only foreign presence in India is that of Russia. जब हम बात करते हैं Kudankulam power plant की, which is there in Tamil Nadu, so which predates the nuclear liability law. So इस law से पहले का we are having this Kudankulam plant, which is in collaboration, foreign collaboration with Russia. Apart from this, जो बाकी countries के साथ we are having collaboration, so we are like basically seeing that all those projects they are stalled. So government का क्या stand है? Central government, it has maintained that Indian law it is in consonance with this convention. So this convention of the Convention on Supplementary Compensation. So Indian law it is in consonance with that. And section 17b here it said that the provision it permits, but it does not require an operator to include in the contract or exercise the right to recourse. And however, legal experts उन्होंने point out किया है and a plain reading of section 17 suggest कि the provisions they are distinctive and separate, meaning even if the right to recourse against the supplier it is not mentioned in the contract, and the other two clauses they stand. So this effectively means that supplier can be sued if defective equipment provided or if it can be established that damage resulted from an act of intent. So despite that, the supplier can be punished and held liable. So Ministry of External Affairs said that the parliament debates over this law had rejected the amendments to include supplier, and therefore the supplier cannot be liable under this kind of class action suit. However, private sector players that they were not convinced, and experts point out that during a trial, what would be considered is what is enshrined in the statute and not what was discussed in the parliament. So obviously, जब ऐसा कोई incident होता है तो obviously the provisions of law would be applicable. So as for the Jaipur project, government has said that the issues regarding the liability law would be resolved before the French president's visit to India, which was first it was scheduled for March, but it has now been pushed to September. So angry with the reform delays, India calls UN system anachronistic. So with another year of meetings on the reforms, pending UN reforms की बात करें, particularly the question of expansion of Security Council. So this is one of the reforms coming to a close in June. India lashed out at the UN system with its most scathing attack thus far. So in a speech at the UNSC this week, the Indian permanent representative, they called the UN Charter anachronistic, adding that it has failed in handling the COVID-19 pandemic, Ukraine war, terrorism, and climate change. And then the Indian permanent representative also called for a discussion on how to make multilateralism effective by defending the UN Charter. So you need to know about कि जब हम UN reforms की बात करते हैं तो which all elements are a part of it. Moving forward. So right to marry is not absolute. Laws regulate the marriages. This is what center tells the Supreme Court. The right to marry is not absolute. Again, उस पे भी कुछ reasonable restrictions है which are regulated by the law. So Solicitor General says the social institution of marriage was shaped by world religions. He adds the legal recognition of same-sex marriage by making Special Marriage Act gender neutral should be debated in the parliament and not in the court. So this is what Solicitor General on the part of the government had to say to the Supreme Court. So ये issue चल रहा है when we're talking about the demand for legalization of same-sex marriages. So जो petitioners हैं who are coming from this LGBTQ community, they are saying कि आप Special Marriage Act को gender neutral बनाओ and legalize the same-sex marriage. But Even Supreme Court is saying ki how far can the court go when it comes to the legalization thing, क्योंकि whether it is like the responsibility or function of the legislature hai ya fir courts hai, and then this element of judicial activism also comes in, and judicial overreach. So all of these things are going on, and let's see कि final चीज क्या होती है. Because government का मानना यही है कि it is the responsibility of the parliament, and parliament का jurisdiction है when it comes to this question of legalization of same-sex marriages. So going by the words of Tushar Mehta, who is the Solicitor General, he says that a mere judicial declaration recognizing the same-sex marriages would not be enough. The fallout of such a declaration would be too numerous and complex for the court. So proper debate in the parliament is, that's what he is suggesting, is the best way forward as far as this thing is concerned. So there are varied views regarding this. So Prime Minister says that India intends to make healthcare affordable for the whole world. So Prime Minister says that no matter how many advances were made in medicine, access must be assured to the last person at the last mile. So India's goal is to make healthcare accessible and affordable not only for our citizens but for the entire world. And he was speaking at the inauguration, the sixth edition of the One Earth, One Health Advantage Healthcare India 2023 meet. So he also mentioned and talked about India's traditional healthcare systems, which held a lot of answers to even the stress and the lifestyle diseases, and called for an integrated, inclusive, and institutional global response to the healthcare challenges. So he talked about the holistic wellness. So he said that the lack of illness was often equated with good health, but India's view of health did not stop at lack of illness. So good health ka matlab definitely hota hai lack of illness, but that's a kind of narrow interpretation. So being free of diseases were just a stage on the way to wellness, and the goal was wellness and welfare for everyone, and it includes physical, mental, and social well-being as well. And we're talking about good health. So when it comes to holistic healthcare की हम बात करते हैं, तो India has many important strengths like talent, we have technology, track record, and tradition. So the world has seen the impact how Indian doctors, as they are widely respected for their competence and commitment. So that's our achievement, and that's how we are moving forward, and our vision for healthcare. So PM lauds the shared history of Saurashtra and Tamil Nadu. So he said that such centuries old cultural links provide assurance that the country has the intrinsic power to innovate even in the most difficult circumstances. So Gujarat government, it has organized the Saurashtra Tamil Sangamam. Before this, we also had the Kashi Tamil Sangamam. So these are very important. And this was where thousands of people in the southern state with their roots in Saurashtra, they visited the places of their ancestors by special trains organized by the center. So at this time, when the unity of our country is taking shape through great festivals like Saurashtra Tamil Sangamam, Sardar Sahib must have been sending blessings to us all. So the celebration of country's unity is also fulfilling the dreams of lakhs of freedom fighters who sacrificed their lives to see Ek Bharat, Shreshth Bharat. And then the Prime Minister, he also launched the book Saurashtra Tamil Sangamam Prashist by Sri Somnath Sanskrit University. So 360 Indians, they have been evacuated so far from Sudan. So this is under Operation Kaveri. That's the important thing, and they have been evacuated through Port Sudan, so its location and then the geography of all the countries around Sudan, that's become important. The water bodies and the rivers and the lakes. Coming to the world page, here we see so the powerful Iranian cleric Ayatollah Abbas Ali killed in attack in a bank. So Ayatollah Abbas Ali Soleimani was killed in an armed attack. The cylinder was also arrested and is now being investigated. So China pushes largest ever expansion of nuclear arms. So China is pushing ahead with the largest ever expansion of the nuclear arsenal, modernizing the atomic deterrent with an eye on any future conflicts with the United States. And this is the separate think tank, which estimates that China, it has stockpile of around 350 nuclear warheads, but it is growing fast and could have 1,500 warheads by 2035. So China appears to no longer be satisfied with just a few hundred nuclear weapons to ensure its security. So we know key nuclear weapons, they are used as a kind of deterrence by the countries. And then we are seeing that Z holds first call with Zelensky since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So we are trying key this war comes to an end, but with this war, we also see key China and Russia's closeness that is increasing, and China it has not been so vocal and so open about its stance as far as this war is concerned. So it's being said key indirectly or like behind the scenes, China is supporting Russia in this war. So with the rational thinking and voices now on the rise, it's important to seize the opportunity and build up favorable conditions for the political settlement of this crisis. China's leaders, this is what he told Zelensky and read out, has no reference to Russia. So Russia का कोई mention नहीं किया गया. So USA is going to send nuclear submarines to South Korea. So tensions, they are definitely no doubt increasing the Taiwan Strait region. And USA is also doing something or the else as far as this area is concerned. And that's what is irking China here. And coming to the business page, so center tells states to scrap levies on power generation. Power Ministry in a communique warns the states to rescind any unconstitutional imposed, including the vortices that they may have levied on the power generating units, such as the such levies tax non-residents. So this is what center is saying to the states कि scrap all the levies जो भी power generation के ऊपर impose की जाती हैं. And this has been informed to the chief secretaries. So stresses there are no provisions in constitution enabling states to impose any tax on power generation. So states, they cannot impose any tax on power generation, and this has not been mentioned even in the constitution. So that's why states cannot impose such types of taxes. And the center also flags the fact that some states, they have imposed taxes in the guise of levying a cess on use of water for generating electricity. So that's how they are misusing it. And they term it illegal, unconstitutional, as levy has to be collected from consumers who may be the residents in other states. So patent filings in India, they have increased by 13.6%, led by technology. Patents filing is on a rise in India, sugar output to drop on lower cane yield and because of the rainfall. So sugar production this season ending in September, it is likely to be around 32.8 million tons as against the earlier estimate of around 34 million tons. And the crushing season in Maharashtra, it has ended at around 105 lakh tons. So we know that Maharashtra is the state where we have the largest sugarcane production. Coming to the Mint newspaper, so here we'll talk about first credit recovery. So is India's consumption story crisp enough or not? So even as the world it is trying to fight away the economic fallout of the pandemic, and there is like challenge of inflation and recession fears, they have kept the consumption damp. But some of the effect was felt back in India also, but India पे इतना ज़्यादा impact नहीं हुआ, that what we can say, because we have been talking about strong macroeconomic fundamentals, the resilient Indian economy, and then Indian economy is also domestically consumption-based economy. So here we're talking about a consumption story. So India's overall domestic growth story, it was somewhat resilient in the second half of the previous fiscal. Private consumption की बात करें, it showed signs of sluggishness, but demand recovery stayed on course. So demand was increasing, but private consumption was showing some signs of sluggishness. So brighter prospects of consumption and investment, they have led to strong growth projections in this financial year. So brighter prospects, consumption and investment level, baby. So that's what is driving our forecast upwards also, or we can say that's at a very good level. So with most data for the full year now that's been released, so let's try to understand 5 indicators to decode some trends. So सबसे पहला is credit recovery. So credit offtake, it leaves behind the pandemic blues despite the monetary tightening. So despite monetary tightening, क्योंकि monetary tightening या tight monetary policy में interest rate increase किया जाता है, which increases the cost of borrowing, जिसकी वजह से credit demand decline होती है. But despite tight monetary policy, India में we are seeing कि credit demand increase हो रही है. So that's one thing which is a leading indicator of growth. Bank loans, they have showed strong signs of recovery in 2022-23, so much so that a wave of monetary policy tightening by the Reserve Bank of India was not enough to dull it down. So despite that, you can see the credit recovery, it's very strong in India. And air travel back in vogue, but cargo traffic is stagnant. So air traffic, civil aviation sector, it is also expanding at a good rate. And cargo handling में थोड़ा सा we are seeing sluggishness, but again things are positive here. Then auto sales की बात करें तो only 10 states they have auto sales recovered to pre-COVID levels. And this is another discretionary consumption metric जो हम use करते हैं that revitalized in terms of the demand and supply was the automobile segment. Then fuel demand की अगर हम बात करें तो fuel demand, it soared to a record high last year, and with this we also saw कि जो India का import dependence of crude oil, it has reached the level of 87%. So that is at record high levels. So country's fuel demand, it soared amidst buzzing economic activity. And last indicator is going cashless. So the cashless transactions, they go from strength to strength. You can see and you can have a look at the trend, how sharply they have increased in just 2 years. So we have the volume data and the value data. So volume has been going up and even the value has been increasing sharply in an upward trend. So digital payments as spending, it kept the economy purring along. The big beneficiary was the cashless payments, which went from strength to strength as they become ubiquitous in several pockets of the country. So ubiquitous basically means it is something which is present everywhere. So that's how the digital transactions are going ahead in India. So cabinet, it has okayed the medical device policy and 157 nursing colleges. So we are having the National Medical Device Policy 2023 to make India a global manufacturing hub for the medical devices, and this has been approved. So the market size of the medical devices sector in India is estimated to be $11 billion, and its share in the global medical device market, it is estimated to be around 1.5%. So right now, India we are importing 75% of the medical devices from other countries. So with this policy, we would be encouraging domestic investments and the production of the medical devices in the country. And that's how we can also, we can gain a competitive advantage even in exports of these medical devices. From a regulatory framework की अगर हम बात करें, to establishing enabling infrastructure, facilitating research and development, innovation and human resources, the medical device policy will cover 6 broad areas of policy interventions. So this will support dedicated multidisciplinary courses for the medical devices in existing institutions to ensure that there is availability of skilled manpower for the futuristic medical technologies, high-end manufacturing and research to produce future-ready medtech human resources and to meet the evolving needs of the sector. So policy framework है वो develop किया जा रहा है by the Department of Biotechnology. And apart from this, there will also be going to be 157 government nursing colleges. So this will further ensure quality, affordable, and equitable nursing education in India. Taking up the Financial Express now, so here we will see at important things. So whole annuity NPS can fetch OPS like pensions. So PFRDA chief says that even some countries which have defined benefit plans, they fund them via means like a payroll tax. So having a completely unfunded system has its own risk in terms of the sustainability. So the accumulated corpus की बात करें of a subscriber under the contributory national pension system can generate more than 50% of the last pay drawn as the pension after government service period of 30 to 33 years. So this remark, it comes when the government panel, it is reviewing the NPS and exploring ways to make it more attractive in terms of risk-free pension payouts. So review, it is in the wake of many state governments which are reverting back to the defined benefit-based old pension schemes and more announcing plans to follow suit. So states में we are seeing कि जो old pension scheme है, states are reverting back to it. So basically center try कर रहा है कि जो national pension system है, उसको आप और कैसे ज़्यादा attractive बना सकते हो and make it much more risk-free. So आप like fully भी अपनी salary contribute कर सकते हो. तो certainly with the full contribution of 100% invested in annuities or a similar product, NPS will generate more than 50% of the last pay drawn as pension. So this is one thing. And of course, the exact pension would vary depending on the grade and promotion and is subject to various assumptions and calculations. So again, this article is also talking about the national pension scheme. So it's suitable product for agricultural workers because they don't have to contribute regularly. Only once in a year contribution is required and the minimum amount is ₹1,000 जब हम agricultural workers की बात करते हैं. So Atal Pension Scheme hai, Atal Pension Yojana, it added around 11.9 million subscribers in previous year compared with 9.9 million. And the government, non-government sector like corporates and citizens other than the Atal Pension Yojana, they also crossed a landmark of 1 million new subscribers in the previous year. So you can just go through this article. So GST and Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology officials, they are tracking the offshore online gaming firms. So websites and apps of some of these entities, they have been blocked also, catching the tax evaders. So under the GST laws, jo offshore entities here, they have to register as supplier of online information database access and retrieval services. But restricting the apps is one option to ban the content, but these players, they can always change their IP address and remain accessible to Indians. So this is one challenge. Or जो domestic online gaming companies हैं, they have now by and large become compliant with GST laws and they are paying the tax dues as per the officials. So जो domestic online gaming companies है वहाँ पे इतना कोई challenge नहीं है for us, but जो foreign based gaming firms है, they're becoming a challenge. So we have already talked about the National Medical Devices Policy. So our vision is that currently it is at $11 billion, and we expect that by next 5 years, it would be at around $50 billion. Taking up Indian Express now. So here we will be seeing so Delhi में क्या हुआ है, एक medieval monument था, it is raised to build Delhi's jailboard CEO's mansion. So पहले this monument जिसको completely destroy करके ये mansion create किया गया है. And monument जो top पे है, it is like described by the Archaeological Survey of India as Mahal. Former DGBC's wife says that it's not a personal house. So archaeology department saw the possession in 2021. It now finds only a gateway. So January 2021 में, a month after it visited a 15th century monument था, it was on one of the premises of the Delhi Jail Board. It is the Department of Archaeology. They wrote to DGB seeking possession of the monument and gateway for the immediate attention and conservation. So January this year, when it returned to the site, so archaeology department found the monument was vanished and it has been raised to make way for an official bungalow of the then DGB CEO. So जो monument demolish किया गया, that was from Pathan period. Mahal was the name and dating back to 100 and like 1418 के time period का it was this monument which was raised down. So talking about the tiger population in the state of Uttarakhand, so we have like Jim Corbett National Park, and around it, nearby like it, there is Ramganga Reservoir as well. So around this area in Uttarakhand, this is the location. There is like Dala village and Simli village. So the target population, and when we have a look at the trend from 2006 till 2018, so they've been steadily increasing in the state of Uttarakhand, and the highest number of tigers they are found in the state of Madhya Pradesh. So the sad thing about artificial intelligence is that it lacks artifice and therefore the intelligence also, but it's named artificial intelligence. Coming to the explained section, this is a very, very important page. So where is the risk of rising heat the highest? There's a study has a unique answer. So global warming, it is making dangerously hot weather more common and more extreme on every continent. So the bigger picture is that study looks only at maximum temperature, which aren't the only factor that can make heat waves devastating. Humidity is also an important thing. And then we've also talked about relative humidity in detail before. And sweltering overnight temperatures, which eliminate the opportunities for the people to cool down from oppressive daytime conditions. So significance is that new study shows key hot spells that fall outside the range of statistical plausibility. They have occurred all over the world throughout the past few decades, so this suggests they could happen again anywhere. And human-caused climate change isn't helping. So there are some areas of particular risk, which includes far eastern Russia, northwestern Argentina, and part of northeastern Australia. But there are like many areas जहाँ पे अभी तक by chance they haven't yet experienced extreme heat conditions like extreme heat waves. So then again कुछ risk भी है उनके लिए कि they might not be prepared to deal with like situations in future, and that includes places like Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, plus the region of China around Beijing. But they also includes developing countries like Afghanistan, Guatemala, Honduras, Papua New Guinea that are more likely to lack resources to keep the people safe. So Chhattisgarh mein we saw this Naxalite attack, and reason ki why Chhattisgarh state only and why now. So every year, months preceding the monsoon, they see heightened military activity before the monsoon comes, and there are more number of attacks by the Maoists on security forces. So Chhattisgarh, where Maoists, they have killed the 10 security persons and the driver on Wednesday, there has been slow to raise a strong local force considered key in the fight against लेफ्ट विंग एक्सट्रीमिज्म. सो यहाँ पे वी आर सीइंग कि इतना ज़्यादा हमें सक्सेस नहीं मिला व्हेन इट कम्स टू रिड्यूसिंग the left wing extremist activities in the Dantewada district, because जो strong local forces है जो बहुत important role play करती हैं, we have not been so successful in raising them. So up and down battle, Maoist attacks का graph है, data है, security personnel killed. So Maoist attacks, this is in the blue bar graph. So you can see कि कोई एक particular trend नहीं है. Like 2018 में there were 275 attacks, then fell down to 182, then again they rose, again they fell, again they rose. So that's what is the trend going on. And as of 2023, 37 attacks have been carried out so far. So this is one thing that we can like understand, little trend, a small trend. So अभी current situation की बात करें, LWE situation in country now. So most जो Maoist influence है and associated violence, it has been falling consistently due to vigorous actions by security forces in their strongholds, roads and civic communities reaching the interiors to greater extent, and disenchantment with the Maoist ideology among the youth. So ये कुछ main reasons है जिसकी वजह से we've been seeing कि activities related to the left wing extremisms, they have been like consistently falling क्योंकि कुछ measures, कुछ steps security forces ने लिए हैं जो area basically stronghold माने जाते हैं of such extremist people. Then infrastructure पे काम किया गया है, जो roads हैं, civic amenities है, they have been made available to greater extent in the interior areas. Thirdly, जो youth population है, they are like not on the same page as of the Maoist ideology. So according to the Home Ministry, Maoist violence, it is down by 77% since 2010. And the resultant deaths of the security forces and the civilians, they came down by 90% from the all-time high of 1005 in 2010 to 98 in 2022. So number of deaths has fallen by 90% and number of such violent incidents have also fallen by 77%. So जो Naxal affected districts है, their number have also been fallen to 90 such districts जहाँ पे भी ये like such activities are seen, and there were earlier 200 districts early 2000 के time पे जहाँ पे they were like we were seeing such types of attacks, and now the number is at 90 districts. So जो 90% की left-wing extremist violent activities they are just concentrated in 25 districts. So Naxal presence is there in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Odisha, Jharkhand, and Bihar. It is said to be near zero. So in states mein, that's what we can say is one of the achievements so far. कि यहाँ पे जो नक्सलाइट एक्टिविटीज है दे आर ऑलमोस्ट अराउंड नियर जीरो इन दीज पर्टिकुलर स्टेट्स, बट छत्तीसगढ़ अभी भी हमारे लिए चैलेंज है. सो इट इज द ओनली स्टेट जहाँ पे माउस्ट दे कंटिन्यू टू हैव सिग्निफिकेंट प्रेजेंस एंड रिटेन द कैपेबिलिटी टू माउंट बिग अटैक्स. सो छत्तीसगढ़ एक ऐसा पर्टिकुलर स्टेट है जहाँ पे अगेन दिस इज अ चैलेंज फॉर द स्टेट. सो ये माना जाता है कि जो वॉर अगेंस्ट लेफ्ट विंग एक्सट्रीमिज्म है इट कैन ओनली बी वन बाय स्टेट पुलिस एंड नॉट सेंट्रल फोर्सेस. So state police can help in winning the war against them. So it is the state police जो understand करती है हम लोगों की language, and they have the local knowledge also and networks which are essential for even intelligence gathering. So that's where the role of state police becomes very important. So it is by putting the local police in the leading role कि states like Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal, Odisha, Jharkhand, they have ended their mouse problem. So ये model already implement किया गया है and we have seen the results also. So all these states, they formed special units of their police forces with personnel and officers drawn from the state, given them special training, and they won the battle with concerted security and development efforts. So this process, security establishment sources say, is stated late in Chhattisgarh. So this basically, this type of model, it has started late in Chhattisgarh. So that's why Chhattisgarh mein still this problem is prevalent. And by this time, police of neighboring states, they had pushed the mouths from their states to Chhattisgarh. So एक ये challenge add up हो गया and making it a concentrated moused zone. So दो चीजें हुई हैं कि जब हम बात करते हैं गिविंग इम्पोर्टेंट रोल टू द लोकल पुलिस, ये वाला प्रोसेस छत्तीसगढ़ स्टेट में लेट स्टार्ट हुआ. एंड सेकेंडली जो सराउंडिंग स्टेट्स पे थे जो जहाँ पे ये प्रॉब्लम थी, तो उन्होंने इस मॉडल को पहले अडॉप्ट कर लिया. दे हैव बीन सक्सेसफुल इन टैकलिंग विद दिस चैलेंज. बेसिकली जो वहाँ की मोस्ट पॉपुलेशन थी दे हैव शिफ्टेड टू छत्तीसगढ़, तो चैलेंज और एडअप हो गया, प्रॉब्लम और ज़्यादा इंक्रीज हो गया. So how has the center responded to this problem? So apart from supporting these states through security related expenditure, जो center provide करता है to these states, it also focuses on equipping the security forces to fight the Maoist. So special infrastructure scheme है which aims to strengthen the local police and intelligence setups. Special central assistance here for building infrastructure like roads in these districts. Center has maintained a massive presence of CRPF forces in the affected states for almost 2 decades. It's been 20 years. So Chhattisgarh mein CRPF, it has been consistently enlarging its footprint by opening new camps deeper into the jungles of South Bastar. And over the past year, close to 20 forward operating bases, they have been set up in Bastar. Center is pushing for the erection of mobile towers in the interiors, which would help the local people connect with the mainstream, also generate technical intelligence also. And Center, it has also unleashed the National Investigation Agency also and the Enforcement Directorate on CPI Maoist cadres, their leaders and sympathizers with the aim to choke their funding also. So central agencies, they have registered several cases also. They have conducted hundreds of raids. They've confiscated property worth several hundred crores of rupees so far. So That's what the situation is. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And that's a wrap for today. And if you like the session, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button for this video.